Okay, this video is chapter 19 about Martin Pall as well as EMF, cell phones, Wi-Fi, and all that kind of stuff. This is from the book Medical Reformation. Martin Pall is a genius. He's a physicist and a biologist. He's got lectures on YouTube and other video channels. He's a little bit boring. He's a little bit of an Asperger autism type guy. I get that impression, kind of monotone, but he's very, very smart. He's done some really good work. Here's his book. It's called Explaining Unexplained Illness. And he has this pathway that he's the world expert on called the no pathway, which means, the nitric oxide, peroxy, nitrite pathway here. So again, here's his book, Martin Pall. It's a good book, but it's kind of long. It's kind of repetitive. I think it was something like 600 pages of small print. And he repeats himself over and over again in certain parts of it. But he makes the point that he's got the best explanation paradigm for a lot of diseases that are not otherwise well understood. Things like chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple chemical sensitivities. His theory is, he also has a theory for fibromyalgia. There's other theories for fibromyalgia, but he's got one of them, and some of these other things which you hear about a lot. I think he exaggerates a little bit how much his theory can explain, but it is actually pretty good. In the past, we talked about nitric oxide. Of course, Dr. Esselstyn talks about it nonstop, and how nitric oxide is so important for being the most important vasodilator coming off your arterial lining cells, your endothelium, to keep your vessels open. Okay, but Paul has the no theory, the nitric oxide, peroxy, nitrite theory. And what he basically says, nitric oxide is bad. Nitric oxide in excess amounts is a disaster. So, how do you reconcile these two seemingly opposing statements? Okay. And here's a secret. I'm going to explain it in just a moment, but they're talking about the body has different types of nitric oxide production. We'll explain that in a moment. So they're talking about different locations. When Dr. Esselstyn lectures about nitric oxide, he's talking about the endothelium. Endothelium is the name of the arterial lining cells. And when they produce nitric oxide, it's a wonderful thing. It causes vasodilation of the vascular smooth muscle. It's a gas, so it can diffuse in two directions. It'll diffuse into the wall, and then it'll dilate the vascular smooth muscle cells so the artery is wider in diameter. Viagra opens up, increases nitric oxide into Johnson. It'll also, as a gas, diffuse into the arterial lumen, and it'll cause the platelet cells to prevent them from clotting. Okay, so that's all good, and that's what Esselstyn's talking about with endothelial nitric oxide. And typically you'll take this E from endothelial, you'll put it in front of NOS. NOS is nitric oxide synthase, and that's called iNOS, okay? So iNOS is also given a number. The reason they give it a number is the enzyme can be present in other types of cells. So it's not just in the endothelium. And it actually ended up being called NOS3. And that's real easy to remember because just remember the letter 3 looks like the letter E. So I imagine just flipping it around, you got an E. So eNOS is NO3. Easy to remember. You don't have to remember all this, but some of you are a little more interested. You might want to. Okay, NOS is neuronal for your brain cells. Neuronal NOS. And they call it NOS1. And I can remember that pretty easily because I always look for a trick to remember stuff. So I remember there's one letter N, the letter and number 1 is 1. It's a one-piece letter, just one continuous line is the letter N. So that's NOS1. And then iNOS is inducible NOS. You can almost think of it as being immune system NOS. And it's a different player altogether. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the way you can remember iNOS as NOS2 is there's two parts. There's a little line, the little vertical line stroke, and then there's the dot. So that's two parts, so that's NOS2. For what that's worth. If you start reading the papers on it, you'll be glad you know that. For just the purposes of my talk, it's not too big of a deal. You just need to know there's NOS on the endothelial cells, there's NOS in the neurons, and then there's NOS of the immune system, the inducible component. Okay, and again, most of the time, these are all good things. They're all there for a reason to do their job. Can help prevent infections. The problem is in the modern world, iNOS has a tendency to get overactivated, and then it can start causing damage. Okay, another real important point is that normally eNOS and nNOS, so endothelial nitric oxide synthase and neuronal nitric oxide synthase, are only on a short amount of time. So they only produce these real micromolar quantities, and they're on and off real quick. They do their job, get out. Do their job, get out. Okay, whereas iNOS, I for inducible means that you can turn it on and off. eNOS tends to run almost continuously in lower amounts. And iNOS is especially associated with the immune system. Even the letter I, remember, it's always associated with the letter I for multiple different reasons. So we'll come back to that. And the problem with iNOS is it'll stay on for long amounts of time. And it'll make tons and tons of nitric oxide, more than you want if you're activating it for stupid reasons. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about nitric oxide production. And so again, you've got eNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, and you got nNOS, neuronal nitric oxide synthase, and all of them make nitric oxide. They'll start with the amino acid arginine, some oxygen, and something called BH4, okay, and tetrahydrobiopterin, and they'll make nitric oxide. That's how it should happen, all right? But you can run into problems. You can run into things that flat out inhibit the enzyme, like dietary sodium. That's another reason why I really like to reduce dietary sodium. And some people are more sensitive than others to the effect of sodium, and it also depends on how much potassium you're eating. The more potassium you're eating to counteract the effects of sodium, the more sodium you could eat theoretically without a problem. So you can even use that as a strategy. If you're forced to eat out and there's more salt on the food than you like, eat extra plant foods to get more potassium to counteract it a little bit, okay? Excessive dietary fat, especially sat fat, inhibits endothelial nitric oxide synthase. Free fatty acids being released in the blood, in a fat person, a diabetic person, they'll have an inhibitory effect. Smoking cigarettes, stupid. You're doing a lot of bad things when you smoke cigarettes. Not only are there carcinogens, you're also going to cause an increased hematocrit associated with hypertension and atherosclerosis, and you're also inhibiting nitric oxide production, so you get more vasoconstriction. Not good. Pretty stupid. Okay. Next thing is you have some things called uncouplers. So if you have a lack of folate, remember F for folate, comes from foliage, from plants. You can get uncoupling of NOS, nitric oxide synthase, and instead of producing nitric oxide, it'll just make superoxide anions. Those are free radicals. You don't want them. They're reactive oxygen species. They cause oxidative stress. Not good. If you've produced peroxy nitrite, that can also uncouple this enzyme. What are some of the other things? NADPH oxidase can lead to the production of superoxides. Diabetes is associated with increased activation of nitric oxide. NADPH oxidase. Okay, so the more of this you get, superoxides, the more problems you're going to run into secondarily with making peroxy nitrites. Okay, I'll show some more slides about what that's all about. Okay, so we talked about BH4 tetrahydrobiopterin, and that can lead to uncoupling of NOS, producing superoxides. We talked about how tobacco, salt, and dietary fat are all a negative. Okay, a little bit about antioxidants. An antioxidant is something that prevents oxidation, and it does that by donating an electron. In general, a lot of pathogens are electron stealers. They have a high electronegativity. They grab an electron, they steal it, and they don't give it back, okay? And when you have an unpaired electron in the outer orbital of an element here, this will become hyperreactive. And so an antioxidant is something, usually a bigger molecule, a lot of double bonds in it, and it'll donate an electron to these free radicals, reactive oxygen species. And once it donates an electron, this will become neutralized, stabilized. Now you would say to yourself, well, how can the antioxidant do that and not become a free radical itself? And the reason is they're such big molecules with so many double bonds that they can sort of stabilize the charge. They can, even though they've given up an electron, they can balance it out over multiple different bonds and carbons and hydrogens such that it ends up not being a big deal. Vitamin C is like a classic antioxidant of your aqueous solution, like your cytoplasm, your extracellular matrix, okay? Vitamin E is like a classic antioxidant of your plasma membranes. It's lipophilic. Okay. So here we've donated an electron, the blue from here, and now it pairs up with this red unpaired electron in the outer orbital of this molecule, and so now here's the residual red in there, but now it's stabilized as a neutralized free radical. Because otherwise you can get free radical chain reactions and have them do a lot of damage. That's what oxidative stress is all about. Okay. So what you really want is to have more antioxidants, electron donors around, and you get these just from eating your plant foods, okay? Lutein from eating your plant food, your greens, vitamin C, vitamin E, beta carotene, okay? And the best way to get them is from eating your plant foods. I don't recommend taking supplements of these things because a lot of times that messes up the ratios of things. They're not always have that good a quality control for these things. Okay, superoxide dismutase is the big antioxidant enzyme in your mitochondria. Okay, so here's electron stealers, and these are things like free iron will steal electrons, F minus fluoride will steal electrons, fatty acid peroxides, reactive oxygen species, superoxides, hydrogen peroxide, hydroxyl radicals. RNS means reactive nitrogen species, okay, instead of ROS, reactive oxygen species. There's nitric oxide, there's peroxy nitrite, okay. Okay, here's just a little diagram to show why is it that they come from plants. The reason is, okay, here's you. You are here, this person. If it's really hot, 100 degrees outside in the hot sun, you'll go, gee, it's hot. This doesn't feel so good. I don't want to get a sunburn. So you just walk under the shade of the tree, and you can adjust your exposure to the sun's rays, the ultraviolet, by just changing your location, your position. But the plant can't move. It can't walk. So it has to defend itself with chemicals. And it defends itself with chemicals by producing antioxidants. So when you eat the plant, you get the antioxidants, and they then protect you. You don't get that many antioxidants from eating an animal because it's used up most of its antioxidants. Okay, so this is showing something similar to what we looked at earlier, but in more detail. So what's happening here is I've now took the iNOS, and instead of having it over here on this path to making nitric oxide, I've moved it over here, iNOS. And remember, it's I for inducible. And notice that a lot of things that start with the letter I will increase activation of iNOS. And the point about it is it produces, I meant here, micromolar quantities, and it'll stay on sometimes for hours. Versus these guys, eNOS and nNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase and neuronal, they're only on for minutes, seconds or minutes at a time, and they produce nanomolar, so much smaller quantities. All right, so what are some things that will activate iNOS? Things like ischemia, lack of oxygen delivered to the tissues. That's common in a lot of people. Injury, like head trauma, TBI, traumatic brain injury. Intoxication with alcohol. You know, I think alcohol is the stupidest thing. People say, oh, let's get stoned. Why would you want to poison your brain? That's stupid. Okay, infections, postprandial LPS, inflammatory cytokines, the immune system itself. Like, you know, the main job of why do you have it? It helps you to kill bugs when you have an infection, so it can be very useful in that setting. Activation of nuclear factor kappa B is associated with increasing the inducible nitric oxide synthase. There's other chemicals in food and processed food that tend to increase activation of iNOS, things like glyphosate on the non-organic soy, for example, but they also spray it on oatmeal and beans. Just being fat, you'll have more systemic inflammation related to activation of iNOS. High fructose corn syrup will do it. HG is associated with it. Insulin resistance in general and the AGEs, advanced glycation end products, they will increase iNOS, okay? Hyperglycemia is associated with that. So anyways, when you're making more iNOS, you're producing abnormally large amounts of nitric oxide, and this will be happening also in the brain. And that can pair up if you have uncoupled nitric oxide being produced. It can pair up with this nitric oxide and produce peroxy nitrite, which is a bad actor. It causes a lot of problems. Okay, we talked about it. So if you're low on plants, when you're low on plants, you get a lot more problems. You're low on antioxidants, then you're going to have a tendency to be relatively low in folate. You're more predisposed to running these pathways. You'll have more advanced glycation end products, typically with a high-fat diet. Okay, I talked about how you can remember iNOS. Other things that will activate it will be ischemia, so lack of oxygen. Oops, didn't mean to move that. And LPS, so just having leaky gut, postprandial, after eating, that is, you'll get more LPS going in the blood. Also, that's the gram-negative bacteria, endotoxin, lipopolysaccharide is what it stands for. Also, you get more LTA, lipoteichoic acid, from gram-positive bacteria. This LPS activates TLR4, that's toll-like receptor number 4. Other things that make it worse, inflammation. You got a lot more inflammation when you're eating animal foods, dairy and meat. Insulin resistance associated with high-fat diets. Also, insulin resistance is associated with producing more AGEs, advanced glycation end products. You get more dietary advanced glycation end products by eating high-fat foods and meats and high-protein foods. So the main thing iNOS does is it helps the immune system to kill invading infections. Okay, let's see. And peroxy nitrite, which is formed from the combination of superoxide anions and nitric oxide, it can do a lot of damage. It'll inhibit the PMCA, which is the plasma membrane calcium ATPase, making it harder for you to pump calcium outside the cell. It'll inhibit SERCA, so SERCA is sarcoplasm endoplasmic reticulum calcium ATPase, which pumps calcium into the endoplasmic reticulum. So you can see how you're screwing your cell. If you can't pump calcium as effectively into the extracellular matrix, it's going to accumulate in the cytoplasm. You can't pump it in the endoplasmic reticulum. That calcium in the cytoplasm is going to keep going up. We talked about this. This is a mechanism of excitotoxicity. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here. This is an excitotoxic mechanism. It also damages mitochondria, a triple screw job. You need mitochondria to make ATP. You need that ATP to run your potassium-sodium pumps here so you can develop a big electrochemical gradient, and you couple that to the knockout exchanger to pump calcium outside the cell. So the more peroxynitrite you get in the cell, you get a diminished ability to pump calcium out, and these neurons are highly predisposed to being dysfunctional and to going into apoptosis, to being overwhelmed. You get that calcium going up and up and up, it'll activate calpain. Calcium activate enzyme that is painful, and it'll destroy the knockout exchanger, and you're screwed. It's a vicious cycle, neuronal death. So you obviously don't want these things. So you want to avoid things that tend to cause ischemia. And so one of the fastest things you can do is lower your dietary sodium, lower your dietary fat. There's always all these trolls and nonsense experts on the internet that are going to tell you about good fats as a slogan to trick you. All right. And also some people say, oh, well, I can eat sodium, it doesn't affect my blood pressure so much. And it's true that some people, if you're eating lots of plants and you got lots of potassium, it's really sort of the ratio of potassium to sodium that matters more. So if you're eating lots of plants, you're not going to be as salt sensitive because the potassium in those plants and the magnesium help counteract the sodium that you're eating. It's the ratio that matters more. Okay, and you can have more than 100 times as much potassium in a plant than sodium, so you can really get a lot of potassium that way. Okay, now this guy Martin Pall, again, he's a physicist and a biologist, so he knows a lot about both, and he's a really, really bright guy. He talks about the EMF, electromotive force, from cell phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi, opening up VGCC. That means voltage-gated calcium channels. So that means they let calcium into the blood, voltage-gated calcium channels. You need to know that. And this increases neuronal cytoplasmic calcium, so it's activating the neuron. And he believes that excessive exposure to EMF is, in his opinion, definitely been shown to cause dementia in mice. And he thinks that we're in the early part of a giant increase in the amount of dementia happening in young adults. Okay? So what he's saying is a lot of these young adults, especially this younger generation, they're a bunch of, addicted to their cell phones. They're always running around talking, blah, 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 using their cell phone nonstop. You know what it's like if you work around like young people. You could walk into a room and they'll barely acknowledge your presence. They're all glued to their cell phone. They're not even talking to each other. They're all stuck on their cell phones. And I think it's lowering their IQs. I think what happens when somebody gets a cell phone, especially initially, they're not only obsessed with the phone and sending text messages to their friends, but they forget about anything that requires more attention span. They stop reading. I've seen that happen in kids. Okay, Martin Pall has online videos here at this channel, YouTube, and also at the other, pretty well-known video channels. Okay, he's a brilliant guy. Like I said, he's a little autistic. Let's see here. What else we got here? Okay, he's claiming that he thinks humans have been exposed to so much EMF through their cell phones, their Wi-Fi, cell towers and stuff, that he thinks that we are in sort of the lead phase that's relatively asymptomatic, and he says we're going to see a tidal wave of cognitive impairment within the next 5-10 years. Now, it's been my experience, and main thing I do nowadays is I used to do a lot of interventional radiology, imaging guided surgery, but now I mostly do neuroradiology, and I can tell you the incidence of dementia or cognitive impairments dramatically increased. I see cognitively impaired, brain MRI, memory problems, cognitive impairment, nonstop. It's so common, and he thinks it's going to dramatically vary. He's actually predicting we're going to see a whole bunch of serious cognitive impairment and dementia in people in their 20s and 30s. And he believes that it's because of these cell phones. He also thinks that the new thing, this 5G, is much, much worse than 3G or 4G, he says, because it's pulsed. Apparently, when it's not pulsed, you can get habituation whereby the neurons aren't so sensitive to it. But when it's pulsed, it'll have a tendency to keep on opening up these voltage-gated calcium channels, letting more and more calcium in. And you think it's going to stupefy a lot of people. So, my advice would be, number one, avoid it to the extent you can. You can't fully avoid it. But number two, don't make it worse. Avoid all the excitotoxins. No cigarettes, eat a low-fat diet, avoid processed food, avoid head trauma, avoid all these mitochondria inhibitor pills like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors for depression. Talk to your doctor first. Don't just listen to me. But I'm just saying is be real careful about going on that stuff. Same thing with statins and metformin and a lot of these antibiotics. Okay, and watch out for contaminated food, contaminated tap water, and these estrogenic chemicals, BPA. They're all, anything that's inhibiting your mitochondria. I gave a previous lecture, I think it was my last lecture on mitochondria inhibitors, is going to decrease your ability to pump calcium out of the cytoplasm. So this is a big deal. Okay. Well, here's a couple other books about it. And also, I think these cell phones are stupid. Okay, let me explain. You ever, look at your cell phone. How come you can't turn it off? You can't turn it off. They don't let you take the battery out. There's no off switch. They'll say, oh, yeah, you can put it in airplane mode. But it's not really fully off when it's in airplane mode. So why do they do that? Because I think it's because they want to track you. They want to track you like an animal. And now, why would you track an animal? You would track the animal if you think you own it. It's a farm animal. It's not, sentient. It's not conscious and aware of itself like a human we consider ourselves to be. So is it because the cell phone companies consider you a farm animal? Okay. The other thing that a person does is they track something. A hunter tracks a deer before it's going to, then ILL, the deer, okay? So what I wonder is this being used to track citizens? Because you notice there's this incredible desire to track everyone everywhere they go, everything they do. A GPS in a car tracks everywhere a person goes, okay? Credit card tracks everywhere they spend money. There's a big push for electric cars that will track them everywhere they go, that can be turned off. And I've heard that it can take a real long time to recharge an electrical car, like even hours. So that means you can never go anywhere because you're not going to want to sit around for a couple hours at some rest stop. You want to go and come back. So they can also be turned off externally. Like let's say you're driving too fast, you get a ticket, you don't pay your ticket, they'll just turn your car off until you pay your ticket. But anyways, it's also something that you can be controlled externally. They could crash you into a wall with that. I mean, it sounds to me quite stupid. And so why is there so much desire of the controllers to control and track everyone everywhere? And I'd be real careful about buying apps. And what am I talking about? I think the apps are going to be used as a way to categorize people, okay? And we already know that the billionaire, perverts want to get rid of Christians. So if you buy one of those Christian apps, this is my guess. I don't know if this is true. I have no factual information whatsoever to support this. All I have is my ability to think. And it seems to me likely that a so-called Christian app like Halo or something, they're going to use that to track all the Christians. And, they could easily put like a bug zapper into any public building or something and just zap all the Christians that way. I mean, think about it. You got to think like a billionaire pervert, okay? They've stated that they want to reduce the population by 93%, and they especially first want to get rid of Christians. And you would say, well, why would they want to do that? And I think it's because that's one of the reasons I like watching these movies about Rome. Because in Rome, the Roman emperor was worshipped as a god, okay? And so the Roman emperors, especially early on, they did not like the Christians early on in the Roman Empire. So, in the time of Tiberius, Jesus Christus was crucified. And then not long after was the time of Caligula, and not long after that. So I think it was Tiberius up until about maybe 37 AD, and then Caligula 37 to 41 AD. And then Nero was, I think, after that, something like that, until about 64 AD. In that ballpark, those are the Roman emperors. So what am I trying to say? Well, the Christians would say, we worship God, the true God, okay? And they're going to say, the emperor is a person, a man, not the true God. So they wouldn't worship the emperor, and that would piss off the emperor. They would say that that is, going against Rome. All right, so why am I telling you that? Because I think my impression from what I'm seeing about the billionaire and you-know-what perverts is they want people to worship them. I'm not joking. You think I'm joking? I'm not. Look it up yourself and study it. And so they don't want these Christians. They don't want somebody saying all men are equal in the eyes of God. Or they want to say they're up here and all the regular people are a bunch of low-life, useless eaters who are going to have their numbers culled. They call it culling the herd, resetting the herd numbers. Okay? Anyway, so what I'm saying is I wouldn't be walking around with a device that's tracking me and it's potentially connected to some bug zapper or something, okay? I think that's pretty stupid, not to mention all the other problems those things cause. In your front pocket, you microwave your balls. In your chest pocket, you microwave your chest, your pecs. A couple decades of that, you increase your risk of breast cancer. Keep it in your front pocket. You're lowering your sperm counts, lowering your testosterone. It's not that far from the ovaries. You put it in your back pocket. Your low-power microwaver on your butt, on your anus, rectal cancer, I would worry about the risk of that. The thing's overrated. I would carry it separate from your body, and even don't carry it if you don't have to. There's no rule that you have to have a phone right in your hand all the time, okay? I somehow grew up without one, and I was fine. I never, dreamt about wishing I had something that I could always have in my hand all the time. I actually used to have one for a while when I was doing, mostly imaging-guided surgery. It was a pain in the ass getting called all the time, paged all the time. I didn't like it. Okay, so anyways, here's a book, EMF'd by Mercola. Mercola's a smart guy. Now, don't get me wrong. He's always trying to sell something, and that's why he's a multimillionaire, okay? I'm jealous of him. And he's very bright, though. But I was surprised how good this book was. It is very intelligently written, surprisingly good. It is quite a good book. He also sells stuff. He'll sell like a Faraday cage to, prevent EMF exposure. This other book, Overpowered, was pretty good too. The author's name is Martin Blank. He's a PhD, and he does a lot of research on that sort of thing. So he knows what he's talking about. I thought his book was pretty good. Mercola's is better, though. I would read Mercola's first, and then if you still want more, then I would read Blank's. Okay, here's another thing I want to share with you. This concept of the last straw on the camel's back. The idea that you just keep piling stuff on and you start to crash and burn. And it's also reminds me another phrase, death by 1,000 cuts. And what I mean by that is a typical person just keeps piling stuff up. They expose themselves to toxic chemicals constantly, like these, omega-6 cooking oils. They're toxic. You produce toxic aldehydes, HNE, hydroxynonenal. They're exposed to excessive amounts of iron in all the iron-fortified food and the meat they eat. They're exposed to copper, for example. Let's say if they're taking like a multivitamin. I think multivitamins in general are stupid because there's a lot of times things in there you don't want. You can get ferroptosis, a type of cell death related to being iron overloaded and simultaneous lipid peroxidation. We talked about a lot of people. Most people are exposed to multiple mitochondrial inhibitors, quite often SERCA inhibitors. Excitotoxins, MSG, MFG, manufactured free glutamate. They routinely choose to drink coffee or tea every day, exposing themselves to caffeine. Cl- minuses in their tap water. They don't filter it out. Excessive dietary sodium in their processed food or their meat flavorants. Glyphosate we talked about. All of these things are brain toxins, okay? And that's also one of the benefits you get to come to my side. I'm teaching you all this stuff so you don't have to be a chump. If you're walking down the street and a car's coming towards you, you go, uh-oh, you jump out of the way, okay? But if the car is invisible, what are you going to do? So these are like invisible cars, little toxins coming at your brain. And I'm telling you about them so you can avoid them, okay? And I'm telling you this for your own good. I avoid all this stuff, And it's sort of like a lot of people say, oh, you're just smart. You know what? I do all these things because I want to be smart. Okay? Believe me, I got plenty of problems in my life too. But what I'm trying to say is I try to coach people on improving their cognitive function. I'll try to coach college students, graduate students. And it always annoys me that they'll sometimes give me this little attitude. When I was in college, I was a varsity starter, but I wasn't as good as I wanted to be my sophomore year. I had a winning record, but nothing special. And so then luckily, Mark Schultz, the coach, I asked him to help me, and he was nice. He kind of offered to help me. And what I learned to do is when somebody's really good at something, give them a chance to talk. Let them talk and just do whatever they say. Try it. If it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. Don't do it no more. But let them talk, because as soon as I started listening to Schultz brothers about wrestling, those guys are geniuses at wrestling. I got way better. And what I'm trying to tell you is when it comes to improving cognitive function, I'm an expert on this. I have a really boring life. I've been thinking about this stuff for decades. So just try it. You'll be surprised how much smarter you can be. Your attention, your memory. Okay? Like I said, I got young people, they'll tell me, like sometimes people send me students, grad students, college students, whatever, and ask me to give them advice on school. And they'll sometimes say, well, I'll watch your shorts, make this into shorts, but I don't really like to watch long-form videos. And I'm like, are you kidding me? They claim they don't have attention spans. They can't handle a long-form video. Okay, they're in their 20s. Martin Pall, I think he's right. A lot of these kids have no attention span. How can you learn if you don't have a sustained attention? Okay, when I'm interested in something, I'll focus on it 10, 12 hours in a day, okay? Okay, lack of dietary fiber not only causes leaky gut, it causes leaky blood-brain barrier. Then you get toxic chemicals into your brain and you get brain fog, okay? Lack of eating plants makes you low in potassium, magnesium. These are the most common dietary deficiencies. Fiber, potassium, magnesium, nitrates, and antioxidants, because they all come from plants. And every one of those things improves blood flow or protects your blood-brain barrier. So you need them all to have optimal brain function. Okay, get your sleep. A lot of times we go to bed too late. Go to bed earlier. Manage your stress. Have a purpose in life. When you have a strong sense of purpose, it directs you. For example, when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a good wrestler. Because I really wanted to be a good wrestler, when other people would come by and try to distract me. Hey, you want to go to a drinking party this weekend? I say, no. I want to go to bed early because I want to wrestle. I might go stay for a little while and try to find a girlfriend if I didn't have a girlfriend. But other than that, no. I wouldn't go. I would never drink. Okay, let's see. Psych meds, a lot of those things are major neurotoxins. Okay, lack of religion. People make fun of religion, but the fact of the matter is religion people, they're higher achievers. They are more likely to reach their potential. They live longer. They're healthier. It's a good thing. All the blue zones are all religious. Lack of exercise. Yeah, you got to use it or lose it. If you don't keep exercising, you can't do it anymore. It's like wrestlers. You got to keep wrestling or you won't be able to get on a wrestling mat effectively with guys that are good anymore. You just don't have the fitness to do it. Lack of community. Having community and social support is important. So you want to maintain your relationships. Okay, lack of reading. You just become stupid if you don't read. Functional illiterates. Try to have at least one smart friend to talk to. Get your sunshine for your vitamin D, for your nitric oxide precursors released from your subcutaneous tissues, and there's other good things it does. Let's see, what else is on here? I've talked about a lot of these things before. So anyways, death by 1,000 cuts. There's multiple things going on. And these trails of, chem, they're damaging the soil. And not only are people inhaling them, and the Al aluminum's going through their nose up towards their brain, increasing the risk of cognitive impairment. It's going into the soil, getting into their food. It's getting into the water. Municipal places put that in there, a neurotoxin, because even though it has some clarifying effect, it has a more important effect, in my opinion, to cause brain damage. And I think that's also making young children stupid. There's real issues about cognitive impairment. This is not a joke. Okay. All right, let's see. What else? So what I would say is, again, don't add to the problem, and then you'll be more resilient for what you can't avoid. Okay, here's an example of a Faraday tent. It's something to reduce your EMF exposure. You can suspend it from the ceiling. You can put mirrors around the bed to reflect things in another direction. I was talking to a college grad student, and I'm trying to give him advice on how to optimize his academic performance. And I told him, why don't you put a Faraday tent over your bed, see if it makes any difference. And he goes, you don't understand. I go, what do you mean I don't understand? And he says, if I did that, any girl saw that, she would think I was insane, that I was crazy. He goes, if I do that, I'll never get laid. And I'm like, well, dude, you got to figure that one out for yourself. But, find one nice girl, stay with her, and then she'll understand your quirkiness. She'll explain it to her, and she'll be fine with it. But that's a story for another day. Oh, and by the way, you can get Faraday covers I don't have direct experience with them. Like, I don't even carry a phone with me, but you can put them over your phone, apparently. You know, maybe they work well. And they're circumferential. It's like sticking it into a bag, but like putting eyeglasses into an eyeglasses case, and it's a Faraday case. You can put a laptop computer in that. Also, a lot of guys sit with a laptop computer on their lap. They're microwaving their balls. And, you know, who knows, eventually they're going to put this 5G stuff into phones or into laptops, and you're going to make everything accentuated from that. You can get a tri-field EMF tester. I got one. Where the heck is it? I don't know if I got it right here. Crap, I don't want my chair to fall. I got my cushion on my chair. But anyways, I've shown it before when I did videos on that. You can look it up, EMF testing. Okay, and oh yeah, I tested. I have one of these Faraday things around my bed. My EMF inside my bed is 0 compared to other locations. That's pretty good. Okay, so anyways, that's all I've got for EMF, and I think Martin Pall's an interesting guy. I would recommend you check Martin Pall's lectures. And you can learn a lot from him. He's going to say what I said, but in a little more detail. So anyways, hope that was interesting and useful.